Welcome to another amazing episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about cards, guys. It's near and dear to my heart, and that's why I'm here.
Is that why you're really here, Ted?
It's for the love. It's for the love that we give our patrons.
Yes, it is. I was going to say, the only reason why you're really here is because our patrons love you. So just a shout out to all the patrons that help support what we do here at Card Talk. We have 15 as of the recording of the show. We have Daniel, David, Jason, Joseph, Justin, Kyle, Lewis, Mike, Dominic, Phil, Rob, Robert, Russ, and Sean. And I just want to give another little shout out to one of the original patrons of the show, Sean. We met at Con of the Rings, and Sean, I will tell you, he's like our number one commenter, whether it's the audio version or whether it's the video version. It's mainly the video version, but he comments on just about everything that we do, and I love hearing and seeing the feedback that he gives. So Sean, keep up the good work. And if any of you want to support what we do here at Card Talk, we are developing swag to be given away at Con of the Rings, and so there's plenty of time to support our show and be eligible for swag. This year we've decided to keep it open for anybody who donates at any level, whether it's $1 or more. So you can jump over to, I'll put the website right here down at the bottom. It's patreon.com/cardtalk2018, and we will be happy to have you amongst amazing people here at Card Talk. So thank you to everybody who helps keep the lights on. But without further ado, I wanted to talk to the man, the myth, the legend, who is a guest on our show. The community may know him as Vardaen, but Ted and I played against him at Con of the Rings last year, and we just knew him very simply as Steven. So Steven, probably just Steve, or maybe Steven. But Vardaen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Vardaen, it's kind of interesting, Steve, that you're on the show because you have just recently got into Marvel Champions with its release and its subsequent adventure packs and things that have gone on there. And I think you have I know that you've started your own podcast about the show called Critical Encounters. Do you want to tell our listeners about that show? Because there's a lot of overlap between the two communities, right?
Yeah, there is. So we are a Marvel Champions LCG podcast called Critical Encounters. We take a different look at the game than the other guys that are out there. So our show is all about the villains and the encounter cards. We don't review those so-called hero cards. They're, the vigilante guys breaking the law out there. So we're pretty much doing one encounter set per issue. They're short form podcasts, right? So they're like 30 minutes or less, kind of like you guys, nice short things. We don't ramble on for a couple hours. We've only have... at the time of recording right now, I think we have 5 released issues, but probably when this gets released, we'll have another 4 or 5 out there. So,
oh wow,
yeah,
a pretty aggressive release schedule, huh?
Yeah, we're weekly. We're trying to put out one episode a week every Tuesday they come out. So,
oh wow, okay. Well,
yeah,
at least
it's been a lot of fun too.
It doesn't compete with Card Talk's release day on Monday, right?
Right. You can listen to you guys and listen to us.
Right.
And my co-host out there, you might know Big Foam Loaf, Daniel. Yeah. He does Monday Night Twitch with the Wandering Took. Sometimes I'll do Monday Night Twitch with those guys. So those are some names from the Lord of the Rings community people might know. Great guys. And then our third co-host, The Truth, is a friend of Daniel's. So.
Okay. And he does not play Lord of the Rings?
He plays Lord of the Rings. He plays Marvel. He plays everything. He's just not online, really.
So. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
we'll forgive him for that, right?
Yeah.
So, but Steve, I think it's awesome that you have all this involvement in Marvel Champions, but we're here to talk about Lord of the Rings a little bit. So, tell us how you got started doing Lord of the Rings, or where
Sure.
it all began for you, because maybe it didn't even start with the game. You and I are kind of the same age, so maybe it started with reading the books back when you were a wee lad.
Yeah, I got into Tolkien in my teens. So I'm not gonna say it. I'm in my mid 40s. So I started reading The Hobbit. Well, I think I was like 12 or 13. My mom got it for me. Then I read The Lord of the Rings. I read the Silmarillion, and then when those Histories of Middle Earth came out, I just read them as soon as they came out. Most of them. Some of them got pretty dry, and I just couldn't handle it as a young man.
Right.
But so I've always been doing Tolkien stuff. I used to play MERPS, the Middle Earth role playing game.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a blast
by
from the
Ice.
past. Okay.
Yeah, and I used to play on way before we had these MMORPGs or online video games. I played on a thing called a Mush, which was all text based Tolkien role playing game where you like would go from room to room and you type in all the stuff you wanted to do and tell this shared story. And I had a character named Vardaen on there who was a servant of Saruman from Isengard. So that's where that name came from. It just sort of stuck. So
I was gonna say it's like right from the very beginning you were always part of the villain's crew, huh?
that's right. Yeah, always. But we
Does
weren't villains. We were just misunderstood. Saruman's a good guy. Don't you know that?
Saruman's a good guy, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Tell that to the hobbits.
Right? So he's a good guy.
yeah. He
Oh
had good
man,
intentions, I guess. So
you
He's
guys.
just trying to bring people together.
yeah, yeah. Unite the Dunlington tribes against those foul Rohirrim, that sort of thing. So, um,
Come
but
together
yeah,
right
nice.
now. Okay, sorry.
I got into this game during the first cycle, somewhere around like the third or fourth adventure pack. I went back and I was really trying to think about it because I knew it was coming on here, and I think I came in right around the third or fourth adventure pack. My local store had, unlike now, tons of Lord of the Rings cards available. So I bought 2 base sets, all the adventure packs I was missing, and just went all in right off the bat. Um,
Well, I mean, there, there was only the core set and 3 adventure
3
packs, so
adventure,
it's not
yeah, but they were available. You could still buy
right,
them.
right.
So,
It's not
um,
it's not like going all in cost you $1 million like it would today.
no, that's true. Um, and
Uh,
back then, the LCG stuff still felt kind of new 9 years ago, at least to me. And I was able to purchase on eBay a set of those one ofs from the core set for
oh
like
yeah,
12
yeah.
bucks or something. It was
Oh,
crazy. Yeah, people didn't know how the secondary market was going to work on it. So
right.
I was able to get those one ofs. So had got a complete 3 ofs right off the bat by 2 core sets and this little extra eBay thing. So it was pretty. It was a different time for cards back then.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of
It
times.
was the first age of this. I mean, it was definitely different, sort of.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like LCGs, really, Lord of the Rings is the longest running, and I think the first LCG that ever hit the market. Right? Am I mistaken, or is that?
I don't know because they had the Cthulhu one out. I don't
Yeah,
know if,
Uh,
Call of Cthulhu, I think, is older.
and I know that the Game of Thrones one was available too. I remember seeing that at the store and like confusing the pack sometimes. Like, oh, I gotta make sure I get the right one, kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
Game of Thrones was out as well. Yeah, so it was one of the
it was certainly one of the first co-op LCGs, I would think. So
yeah,
oh
definitely
yeah,
first co-op. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I guess that's its niche, right? And I think
yep.
that it stood the test of time. I think if it's been going on for 9 years and it's still as awesome as it is today, like it, or it, make sure that I say this correctly. If it's still as awesome now as it was when it was released, I think that has withstood the test of time to say that this game is really like that co-op LCG thing is something that's here to stay. as evidenced by your podcast and what you do with Marvel Champions, and the developer for Lord of the Rings is developing Marvel Champion, things like that. So
Yeah.
I think that they were onto something here. Um, just a quick aside: are you planning on going to Con of the Rings this year, Steve?
If I can talk my wife into letting me go again, I'm going. So
Was it a huge discussion last year, or was it like a sit down and say, yeah, well, let's go?
no, I've been to Gen Con once. Con of the Rings was less expensive, I
Right.
think.
Super less expensive, I would guess.
Except I have to fly to Con of the Rings, and I was able to drive to Gen Con. It's not the time or that we have a very large family trip planned to Peru, and so we're just trying to budget things. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I'm pinching my penny so I can go to Con of the Rings.
Right. Well, you need to get a Patreon on your podcast quick, so that way you can go to a convention that's not part of Marvel Champions.
Yeah, if anyone wants to pay for me to go, I'm going. I'll be there. So.
Right. That's good. So, and I mentioned this, but I'll say it a little more formally now. Is that Ted and I played against you and
Phil,
who I don't know off the top of my head, but
that's fine. He's not online. He's not in the community really.
He doesn't listen to the show or anything. So, Phil, I'm sorry, not the Phil, the Patreon, our patron Phil. But, and that was a lot of fun to play that cooperative or that competitive version of the game, especially against you. You're so laid back and relaxed, and Ted and I, at that point, we knew we weren't going to do anything like amazing. So it was really awesome to just sit down and play some cards with you.
I think you beat me though, didn't you? I think you won.
We did win, but that's not why I'm not trying to rub it in your face.
It was so bad.
Well, I feel like you just couldn't get anything up and going. Like, I think like you were just struggling to get something. Like, anybody who's played the game knows that, just sometimes you just can't draw stuff.
Yeah, we had our fair share of troubles too. Don't worry.
I know.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty fun to play like that. It was neat to play against other people and see how you built the encounter decks. And a lot of people had similar decks that we made, and then there was the one that Chad made from Cardboard of the Rings that was completely different, and they took the whole thing. So it was fun. I had a good time doing that little bit because the whole weekend wasn't competitive, right? Just that little bit.
Just that little bit. It just scratched a little bit of an itch during the weekend because and to be fair, competitive in the Lord of the Rings community is still pretty darn cooperative, right?
Right. Yeah, it's like, no, you guys could do it this way and make it better. Oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, everybody's helping each other out. Yeah.
Right. And the last thing that I want to say before I guess we could talk about all this stuff all the time, but the last thing that I did want to say is that it was exciting to meet somebody because, Steve, you live near where I graduated from high school, which is kind of a rough not a rough part of New York State, but it's the southern tier of New York State. And so to talk to somebody who was relatively local and knew some of the places that I grew up, hanging out at and things like that.
Yeah.
It was neat to get to know somebody who was close to me. And then, and also my friend who was new to the whole community and never understood anything about, what this community was and, you had talked to him and so it was really nice. It's always nice that the community is so amazing when those sorts of situations arise. So, so thank you, and you were awesome.
Oh, you too. Is he still playing? Is your buddy there still playing?
He still plays when he can, but he's the vice president of some sort of operations at Corning Glass.
Oh, nice.
So he would probably kill me if I told people that, but he has to travel all around and make sure that his products are going well. So that's
we go up there and visit their museum once a year. So
yeah, the Corning Glass Museum is really nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could sit here and talk how awesome the southern tier of New York State is all day long, but
well, maybe for about 2 minutes and then
but this is a show not about the southern tier of New York State, but it's about Lord of the Rings, the card game. And we asked Steve to pick a card, any card he wanted to in the encounter set. No,
Oh, that would have been a different entry.
yeah, no. We asked Steve to pick any player card that you want, and after much flogging and much complaining that he wanted to do an enemy or a bad guy, I said no. You got to stick to some sort of player card. So he chose. Steve, what card did you choose?
Elwing's Flight.
Elwing's Flight. Do you have it open,
Yep,
or do you have it there
do.
so you can read down through it and tell us what it does? Go ahead.
Sure. Elwing's Flight is a spirit event that costs 2 and has the quest action. Ready a questing character and give that character +1 willpower until the end of the phase. Resolve that effect again for each copy of Elwing's Flight currently in your discard pile. You may choose different targets. And that has a great quote on it. There flying Elwing came to him, and flame was in the darkness lit, more bright than light of diamond, the fire upon her carcanet, the Fellowship of the Rings.
And that's obviously from a song, right? Like that's.
Yeah, so I picked Elwing's Flight more for the theme than the mechanics. I really love anytime they call back to Silmarillion and stuff like that, which is what this card, is all about. So
Right. Well, if it's about the theme, then like how is
you want
this?
some?
Yeah, well, yeah. Give us. I mean, we have Grant off in the wings, ready to go for anything that.
It's off in the L wings.
He's.
Oh, nice.
But
Okay, so who's Elwing? That's the question, right?
Right. Well, I know only because Grant told us right before we started recording. So.
Oh well. All right. Well, I can tell you too.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us who Elwing is.
Okay, so Elwing. Okay, so there live. I'm just going to read something that I have.
Okay.
There live still those of whom Lthien was the foremother, and it is said that her line shall never fail. Elrond of Rivendell is of that kin. For of Beren and Lthien was born Dior, Thingol's heir, and of him Elwing the White, whom Eärendil wedded. He that sailed his ship out of the midst of the world into the seas of heaven with the Silmaril upon his brow, and of Eärendil came the kings of Numenor, that is Westerness. So Elwing is Elrond's mother. Eärendil, he's the morning star. He flies around the heavens still. He has a Silmaril. That's Elrond's father. So and then they're also the father of Elros, father and mother of Elros, who founded Numenor all the way down to Aragorn, right? So Elwing is Aragorn's super great grandmother and Elrond's mom. So it goes way back.
Of the line of Beren and Lthien, apparently, according to what you had just read, right?
Yep.
So we'll keep going here with this. This is the stuff that I find fascinating. Well, what importance does Beren and Lthien have, and in the overall story and things like that?
Right. So Beren and Lthien. Beren's a mortal man. Lthien is the fairest of all elf women, and they have they're one of the first pairings of man and elf. They get married and have children, and are first sets of half elves, if you want to call them that.
Were they the first or one of the first?
I believe they're the first.
Grant.
If there's any reference to a couple before then, I am not sure. But for the purpose of the story, they are the biggest ones that are referred to.
Yeah, there's 3 main ones, right? Beren and Lthien, Aragorn and Arwen, and then there's Nimrodel and somebody from Dol Amroth, which is kind of like a half story that we get out of some other stuff. So
I thought you were going to say Galadriel and Gimli.
Oh, you mean Tariel and Keeley?
Oh, right. No, I was talking about real ones that existed.
It was real, but it was real.
Yeah. Right.
What he means to say was canon.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So they do say that Elwing was the fairest of all women, save for Lthien. So she's number 2, I guess, if and the most fairest of women in all of Middle Earth.
Yeah. And
so what's going on here, right?
Yeah, no, well, I was gonna continue with this really quickly. Is that it's interesting because FFG's license is only for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So It's always interesting to see some of the callbacks to the Silmarillion that they can get away with, because of the songs that are in that are in that legendarium. So it's fun to see that sort of stuff, I guess.
Right, and that's the quote, right? It comes out of Fellowship of the Ring, so it's in the first book, which is probably either when Aragorn's retelling the tale of Beren and Lthien, or possibly Bilbo tells a whole story at the Council of Elrond. I can't remember exactly where this comes out of the book, but and there's a quote in there, like Aragorn says, "Oh, Bilbo, you're pretty audacious to talk about Eärendil and Elwing in Elrond's house," because that's his parents. So in the, do you guys ever talk about the art? I know we're not supposed to talk about the art on a podcast.
No, this is a video. This is a video.
Oh
podcast.
Yeah, video. Yeah,
right. Maybe you guys aren't doing video.
We do it all. We talk about the art all the time. But.
We do video only. I mean, that was part of the reason. And I don't mean to bore you with all the details of how this came about, but one of the reasons why I wanted to start the podcast is because I was into making shorter YouTube videos for my own classroom. And I saw the power and how that can help transform, teaching and things like that. But then as I dug further in the community, I found out that the community really only has playthroughs online and doesn't have actual podcasts online. So when I thought about making the podcast, I was like, well, it's got to be a video podcast first, and then the audio. So we strictly did video for about 6 months before, we did audio. And the reason why is because it's so hard to talk about cards if you have somebody who has never seen the card. You know what I mean? When you talk about, Elwing's Flight, and you're talking about the beautiful, bird over the ocean with the moon in the background, it's hard to relay exactly what's going on in there without actually seeing the card. But if you're an experienced player, what Elwing's Flight is, then it's fine. But
so you're telling me it's not the name of that bird?
It is the name of that bird. That's Elwing right there.
That's Elwing, right?
That's Elwing, right? Because what? How's that Elwing, right? So some more theme. I'll just go into it.
Go ahead.
So Eärendil, her husband, is out there somewhere. If you've read the Silmarillion, you guys read that?
No.
I have, yes.
Yeah, okay. I thought granted. It's good. There's a kinslaying, and the elves are killing elves and all this sort of stuff, seeking the Silmarils, which are like these 3 powerful gems that contain the light of Valinor in them. And at one point, Elwing, instead of being captured by the sons of Feanor, she throws herself. She commits suicide, throws herself into the ocean with the Silmaril. And then Ulmo, the Valar of the seas, bores her up out of the waves, turns her into a great white bird with the Silmaril upon her breast, like we see in the art, and she flies across the ocean to find her husband off on his ship and brings the Silmaril to him, and they're reunited that way, and the Sons of Feanor are thwarted. They never get their hands on that Silmaril. And then eventually she's returned to her elven form. She built a tower on the shores of Valinor where she can watch her husband, who sails across the heavens with that Silmaril in the night sky that we can all see if we were in Middle Earth. So that's art. It's perfect. It's everything about that little story.
It's got all the little parts. When I say I haven't read it, I've listened to about 7 podcasts describe the Silmarillion from start to finish.
Oh, nice.
I've never read the words of the Silmarillion since I've started taking up podcasting, I guess.
Gotcha.
It's a choice I have to make, right? I either
you gotta find that time.
Yeah, right.
And just for your own information, Elwing means star form.
Yeah, it's even better.
Like in Sindarin, you mean?
In Entomology. The name Elwing means star form.
Okay. So what does Elrond mean then?
Do you want me to tell you?
Well, I mean, it's funny because it's almost how you know families of elves, right? Because it's Elrond, Elros, Elrohir, Elabea, like Elwing. So it's like all that.
Fingolfin, Finarfin,
Right.
all the fins.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It means star dome
Star Dome.
and vault of heaven.
Does that mean he's bald? Stardom? Oh man, I just went a place, I guess. Ted, bring us back. What are we talking about here? Come on.
Well, I'm still stuck on the fact that I think so are Elrond and Aragorn like distantly related because they come from. Okay, so like Aragorn's like banging his cousin, kinda.
Yeah, but like 25 times removed or something.
Yeah.
Over a couple 3,000 years or something. Yeah.
That's cool. Lord of the Rings might just be ruined forever.
It changes the whole meaning of Couples February, huh? When we did the
Aragorn was born in 2931 of the Third Age.
Aragorn was born in 2931. Okay.
Of the Third Age. Elrond was born in the First Age of 532.
And when was his daughter born?
The Third Age, 2041.
2041. So that I mean, they were removed by
241 of the Third Age.
Right. So I mean, she was born in 241, the Third Age.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So there's 2,500 years difference.
So Steve was right. It's 2,500 years difference.
Yeah.
Aragorn likes older chicks. Okay, it's fine.
Well,
and he's also from Kentucky.
Elrond, he's born in like the First Age. He doesn't have a daughter until the Third Age. There's an entire age. He only has the twins. So there's a long, it's a long absence there.
That's the wrong word. It's not a long abstinence. It's a long abstinence there. Oh, this is.
Yep, there's something new every day.
All Elrond's children were born during the Third Age.
Oh, they were? Okay. Well, because he doesn't meet Celebrian until then, because she's the daughter of like Galadriel.
Yes, she's the daughter of Galadriel and Celeborn.
Yep. Which is why the Celebrian stone works so good with Aragorn, because it's really, he's part of his family.
But there's no actual date for Celebrian being born. It just says before the Second Age. Okay. So.
Let's talk about cards.
Yeah. What have we been doing for the past 30 minutes? Talking about not cards, I guess. Talking about the.
No, but I mean, I didn't know any of that, so that was very, very informative.
Yeah, and the
one thing I find about the cards is we're gonna put, there's 3 Silmarils, and this gets more powerful the more of them are in the discard pile, like as if all 3 Silmarils were in play, which I find to be an interesting little tie-in that they've done.
Oh, and the other thing is the Evening Star, right? That's another one of those play, and it gets as many as are in the discard pile. Oh, which also relates to this story because you said that Arendelle is turns into the Evening Star. He sails his boat off into the sky, right?
He's in Vinglot up there flying around. Yeah.
Right. Oh man, I mean, so
things are making more sense.
To wrap up all of this. Talk about the story of Elwing's flight and all of these things. It's just what it does is it just emphasizes really how much care that Caleb and Matt and Nate and all the designers of the game have for the intellectual property that Tolkien created. I mean, to think about this particular card and to have all of these things happening, and all the the playability of it, like it just really shows how much they care about what the property is. They're not just trying to put something on the table that has Elwing's flight on it that's just there to make money. They really want it to reflect what's going on in the game. Or what they want the game to reflect what's going on in the actual books.
Yeah.
And that is I think one of the core properties of the game is that it really reflects Tolkien's vision of Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. So anyways, about the card, Steve, this is your card. What do you think about in terms of the play of the card?
Right. So I think it plays in great with any of the Noldor stuff, which makes sense because you want them in your discard pile before, you want to try to get 2 of them in your discard pile before you trigger it. So you can use like Arwen, which is also thematically right on the nose, or any of those Noldor effects that want you to discard to bring out this guy or discard this. You can get this card in your discard pile, or 1 or 2 of them, pretty easily in any of those decks. Even not a Noldor deck, right? You can discard to Eowyn or I don't know, whoever else needs you to discard.
Well,
even
Wealth of Lorien, like all these cards, Elven Spear. We were just talking recently about like using cards as another form of currency in the game, and there's a couple of cards that allow you to do that. Elven Light, no, not Elven Light. I'm sorry, Daron's Runes. Like
Aristor.
Like there's just a lot of ways to be able to discard something without necessarily, and still being able to get some use and some payment for it, right?
Yep. Yeah. So if you can get 1 or 2 of these in your discard pile and then you use it, you get to ready up a character. Now you have to do it when you quest,
right?
And you can give them a willpower boost. So you're able to quest with somebody. It really works good with somebody who's got decent double sets of stats. You quest with some guys, you ready up 1, 2, or 3 characters depending on how many of these you're able to get in your discard pile, and you give all of them a willpower boost, a couple points here. So you get that ready effect plus some willpower boost, and you're ready to go to use those guys the second time.
Yeah, so something like
Glorfindel. He's got great stats.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, like Spirit Glorfindel, even Lord Glorfindel, I guess. But Spirit Glorfindel, if you haven't found Light of Valinor yet, it's just a good way to do that. Círdan the Shipwright always comes to mind. Yep. There's a bunch of those Noldor that quest and do something else really well.
And if you had somebody with an ability that you'd want, like a Sigil Miner or a Stargazer or Mary, who's going to give you threat reduction after. Those guys are great.
Spirit Mary, you mean?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it's important to clarify because I'm not so smart when it comes to these things, so I'll probably put a picture of Tactics Mary on the screen while
Well, yeah. In theme, you have the Spirit Legolas. So if you you could play him without needing to have Gimli, like you guys just did, Gimli and Legolas. You don't need to have Gimli if you're using this. You can ready Legolas with it. Or Sullian, she works good for location control. She gets to add her quest plus be ready to use her ability against a location. So,
yeah, I mean, is this a deck? Is this a card that you have to play 3 of, and that you?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, but is it then also a card that you have to run in certain decks, or is it not necessarily required? Like in an Noldor deck, do you have to run this or not?
I don't think this is a required. It's not like I don't know. It's not like a feint that you'd have to use in a tactics, or you've got a leadership deck you have to put in Steward of Gondor, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is snuck into a couple of my decks, but not a bunch, to be honest. And so when you said Elwing's Flight originally, I was like, the bird card?
Yeah, I had it in a recent deck. I just twitched with Big Foam Loaf and Wandering Took, and I had a Gimli Legolas deck I made inspired by your Couples February talk.
Thanks.
And I put this card in there, and I was able to get both of them in the discard pile, and I was ready to play that third one, and we just never really needed it, so I ended up not using it, which was kind of a bummer because I knew I was coming on here to talk about it. So.
Right. Well, I think that's a good sign probably for your gameplay, right? When you don't need to ready and need that willpower boost. But... Okay, well, Ted, what do you think?
Yeah, it's well, we talked about the thematic stuff already, and it's a useful card. It's action advantage, right? And it's already a questing character, So it doesn't have to necessarily be a hero, which is a strength. So you could quest with ally Faramir, and then you could actually ready him, give him the willpower boost, then use his ability, which then also boosts himself because he's committed to the quest.
Yeah.
You know? So it has some versatility. So any hero or any character that has an extra action or high stats, like Steve mentioned, is really great. And it fits into, as I played the Noldor decks, I find that you're always discarding cards no matter what. And when you put these in your decks, they make the choice of things to discard really easy, because throwing the card away, it still has value if you discard it and choose not to have it in your hand, you know? So you're like, well, I drew 2 cards with Círdan, Elwing's Flight and this Test Will. Well, Elwing's Flight can still be used in the discard pile to some effect, so you pitch it. So that choice is really neat. You can do some neat tricks with it too, with like recursion, like actually play it the 3rd time to get the effect 3 times, and then like Dwarven Tomb it back to your hand, and then play it again for another 3 times effect.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna say another great for recursion, to stay with the theme too, is that map of Urnil or Arnil, which is one of the attachments that you get to go and pull back an event or a card of that type. And Arnil is actually a contracted form of the word Earendil, which was Elwing's husband. Yeah, so there's like even more theme there, but then there's also like the map belonging to the 13th king of Gondor, who is all about ships and the navy, and he dies at sea tragically, unlike Elwing. So there's some really neat little theme there where that map plays into this card. It's like one of those things you mentioned, Dave, like the love for the lore and the IP really is well done, I think.
Yeah. Grant, what's your take on this card?
I think this card's got promise. Definitely, if you're running a deck that could use the readying, Dwarven Miners come to mind. You're discarding this from the top of your deck. And if you're using like Day and Ironfoot, it's a way to have them readied and giving the boost to everybody. So yeah, it's definitely got promise. I haven't used it a great deal, if at all, mainly because it's not usually my play style to have things active from the discard. But you never know, I might put this into a deck and give it a go.
Well, I was going to say that, and you brought it up as like this is a great option for a Dwarven discard deck, which is kind of an interesting thematic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because as long as it's getting in your discard and then you can draw it. I mean, you can get a Dwarven discard deck and go through your deck in 3 or 4 or 5 turns, and then play this, and and it's kind of an interesting include there for that action advantage, especially there. And the fact that it's a questing character and it's not one that you control, it's anywhere on the board. So if you're playing multiplayer, like this card gets, I don't know if it gets a lot better. It just gets better because you have more targets to choose from and you can help people. The chances of you being able to ready a character that is going to be more consequential later on in that round is probably more likely. So.
We know that you only play multiplayer exclusively.
Right, I'm such an awesome multiplayer player. So much so that I have retired from multiplayer playing just today. I'm announcing my multiplayer retirement, everybody. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Right. It's nice to actually have somebody who's listened to the show on the show before.
On the show.
So that you can actually say, well, Dave, we know how awesome you are at multiplayer. I try to point out the multiplayer stuff because I'm not good at it. And when I see something that's so obviously pretty decent in multiplayer, I'm like, it's not bad. Multiplayer gets a little bit better. But then we have Ted on the show and Grant, who also plays multiplayer, So Ted, set me straight. since that's how you got on the show. Is this scaled multiplayer? Am I thinking about it right in terms of multiplayer, or
yeah,
am I wrong?
I'd say absolutely. You're right. You get more targets in a multiplayer game, and it can really help out another player because you're like in the quest phase, and too many enemies came up, and you're like, all right, well now we need. Oh, we didn't expect 3 enemies this round. We only planned for 2 at most. And you're like, well, don't worry, I'm going to ready. Even by itself, it's like an emergency ready. Just doing it the one time.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely helps out. Of course, multiplayer too, you can ready someone else's ranged or sentinel character if they happen to be questing that round.
You love your ranged and sentinel, don't you, Ted?
Yes. Very helpful when other people do stuff
for you. Right?
Definitely.
And is there, when I look at this, I think of Elrond's counsel, I guess, +1 willpower and lower your threat by 3. But that's, it's not the same thing because of the action advantage and the cost. But do you play that? So do you play?
That one you need to have an older character as well.
That's true. You need
an older character,
right?
Yeah.
This you could just play, as you pointed out. You oddly enough, the Noldor cards work really good in dwarf mining decks, as as everyone has pretty much mentioned. You can only be running Spirit Dane, as Grant said, and you have access to it, and you'll probably mine some into your discard pile, and you can use it on one of your other heroes to ready.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned cost, and that's my one complaint with this card. I think the 2 is too high. Because you could get 2 costs. You can put it unexpected courage on somebody, and there's the action advantage. So I think it should be a 1 cost. That I don't know.
That's and I was going to get to that, but we'll talk to that now. Is that if you have 2 spirit resources, what are you going to play? Are you going to play this, or are you going to play? And I guess it's situational, right? Because you can get 3 readies out of this as opposed to just 1 with unexpected courage. But
you're playing both,
right? Playing both, right? And then you're spending 4.
If you've got a resourceful, then that's no problem. Pay the 4.
Boom, done.
Resourceful spirit, Steward of Gondor on a spirit character. I guess goes back to the question that I was going to ask is when you look at the two things that it does, it ready as a questing character and gives +1. When you're paying this, when you're playing this card, what are you using it for? Are you using it for the ready, or are you using it for the extra willpower?
Probably the ready, but the willpower is a nice extra. Because if you can ready up 3 guys, right, you can do a big push. Mm-hmm. And +3 willpower, that's somebody else you don't have to send, maybe. So you've got 4 guys ready now. Because you're like, I'm going to give us 3, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the ready is the thing you play it for, right? So.
Yep.
Well, it would also come in handy during the quest in the Durodan Forest, because some of those you require high quest points to get through. So you could send an extra 3 characters to the quest that you would probably hold back. Use Elwing's flight to ready them, and then you've got your attackers or defenders ready for the diplomacy with Ganbury Gan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it works good too in the Dunlin Trap, where they steal all your attachments that you normally rely on to ready.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use this instead because I can't use those.
Yeah. If you're Go ahead. I don't really have anything to say.
Okay, thanks, David. Post staging willpower modification, I think, is actually quite powerful. If you're playing a Spirit Noldor deck like that archetype, you're probably running this. You're probably also running Elrond's Counsel, and probably Lords of the Eldar, I think is the other one where you play from your discard pile.
Yep.
So between all those 3 cards, you have a lot of like control. You have ways to like, oh well, okay, well, what if we only send this guy, and this is too much or not enough willpower? It's like, well, don't worry, let's send this amount, and I can add 3 or add 2 or 1. I can add whatever number we need through these effects, which I think is very strong.
Yeah, I'm slowly agreeing with the post staging modification, and by slowly agreeing, I mean I've been on board with post staging modification of willpower since early in the game's life. But I mean, it becomes even more important when you play the more people in the game. When you're playing solo, it's a little easier to kind of guess what's going to happen, and like all the scrying effects can help solo more than it helps 4-player, things like that. So I don't know, it's just this.
Yep.
That extra willpower is not, it's not maybe why you play it, but it can definitely be helpful, that's for sure. Well, I guess let's spend we'll go around the table one more time to see if anybody has anything to say, and then we should probably ring this guy, right?
Sure.
You're gonna ring the bird?
We're gonna ring the bird's neck.
Poor Elwing.
I know, it's like the albatross around my neck, right? So Steve, is there anything? What last gasps do you have about this card?
I don't know. I think we've said pretty much everything. I'd like to try to give cards a try too. Maybe you're relying on a certain card too much. Get rid of that. Try something else. And there's that new contract out where you can only have one of anything, I think it is.
Right.
So
the
here's
Council of the Wise.
This one doesn't work so great in that, but it does give you a ready and a willpower. You don't get the great parts off it, but it's something different to try if you're not out there using it. That's what I think. So.
Right. Grant, what's your last gasp on this thing?
I haven't really got one. I'm going to look at building a deck and maybe using it in it. Just giving it a go, because like I say, I've rarely used it, if ever, so I'm going to have a look at getting it on the board.
Okay. Ted, what's your last gasp?
It's if you're playing any type of either dwarf mining or Noldor discarding, it gives you some more flexibility. That's kind of how Spirit sometimes plays, because you're holding back resources sometimes for cards. Like you're holding resources back for Test of Will or a Hasty Stroke. So this is sort of just another one of those tools that you can I'm going to save my resources to have like responses to things rather than, putting something right on the table. So it kind of falls in line with that, and it fits very well into a lot of different archetypes.
Yeah. I
David?
agree with all that stuff. I just agree with all that stuff. So I think we should move on to ringing this card. And for anybody who doesn't know or is new to the podcast or has forgotten, we have a highly scientific yet arbitrary system where we ring these cards on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is the one card to rule them all, and 10 is the card that gets thrown back into the fiery chasm from whence it was made. And so, just to clarify, number 1 is the best card in the game, and number 10, if you ring it a 10, it's worst. It's one of the worst cards in the game. And so, Steve, as the guest on the show, you get to choose if you want to go first, second, third, or fourth with your ring rating.
We're gonna save the best for last. I'll go fourth.
Okay. Oh, you said save the best. I thought you meant me go last.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. So, Grant, why don't you give it a shot? What do you say?
I'm going to put it in the middle of the road. I'm going to give it a 5 because I can see the benefits. And until I actually put it on the board, I'm not going to go higher or lower until I've actually firmly played with it. You are such a child.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's been a weird day. Okay. I'll go next, and I'm actually gonna give this card. I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to give it 7 rings. Um, when I ring a card, I ring how often I try to reach for this card. And while this card has made it into it seemed like it is a solo player. It'll get cut out of a deck in favor of cards that do the job a little bit better or a little more precisely. So if I'm going to spend 2, like we talked about, if I'm going to spend 2, we're going to spend two spirit resources to play unexpected courage. So as a solo player, this card ends up getting cut a lot because, in order to take maximum advantage, it's got to go out of your deck. Not to say that there's not a place for it. It's just a card that I don't reach for very often. And so the 7 comes from I'm probably gets an extra ring just because, or one less ring. It becomes better because it's such a thematic home run. And Steven, that was awesome that you definitely explained that to us in detail. So Ted, what says you? Are you gonna wait till it's firm before you play?
Oh,
I'm rated a 4.
A 4. Okay.
And a 4 because it's one weakness. Well, so every card's weakness, I guess, is that you have to draw the card, right?
Right.
To use it. But Elwing's Flight, it kind of has a secondary weakness of you kind of have to draw 2 cards to really make its cost efficient, or 3 cards potentially. But again, if you play it with like any hero where you have to discard a card, we named Hero Arwen, Spirit Legolas, Círdan, Aristor, Spirit Dane. We have to discard or flip cards. You're never like, since you're doing those effects anyway, like, okay, I'm discarding cards for Arwen for resource. Like, you're happy, the choice becomes easy. You're like, well, seeing how, Elwing's Flight, like, I'll see you later when your partner shows up. You just get rid of it now, since you already have to get rid of a card anyway, or because you want the effect of what the card gives you, whether it's Protector Florian or whatever you're discarding for, Elven Spear, Arwen's Resource.
Right.
And having that flexibility is really, it makes it easy. You can be lazy. And I'm a lazy player sometimes.
Okay. Mr. Vardaen.
I'd love to give it a 3 because there's 3 of them and 3 Silmarils and just stay with the theme. But I think I'm with Ted. It's a 4 in my book.
Wow. It's not your podcast. You can say it's a 3. What are we going to do?
I like to try to be true here to myself.
Okay.
I do think it's a 4. It has its place, and that place is not in every deck. But it could be fun to use too, and I just enjoy the card itself, which for me is a bonus for the card. Is it fun for me? Do I like to see it? Do I want to try to make this card work? So that always makes the card go up a little bit. I try not to always reach for the same cards, because then I get the same game, and there are so many cards and quests and games I want to play a different game every time. So this card is something that I've started to go for recently, so that I could try to have a little different experience. So I think a 4 is right where I'm at.
Okay. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule here. You have your own podcast to worry about, and it's just always nice to have experienced players on the show, and your insight into Tolkien's universe here with this card was phenomenal. So it's just great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed being here and listening to you guys, and maybe we'll have one of you guys come on our Marvel podcast sometime.
Well, Ted plays Marvel. I don't know. I don't play Marvel, but Ted plays Marvel.
All right.
And
I'm an avid Marvel player. I've added that to my collection.
I don't think that Grant plays either, right?
No, I don't have the time.
Don't have the time. I guess with 5 kids and an own podcast, I guess that's that's enough time. Right?
Between Card Talk, the stuff I do with Samuel, the kids, work.
Yeah.
That's enough. I got it. Right. Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week as we talk about more cards from the game. Have a great day.
And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube, where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed, cardtalk2018.libsyn.org, for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself, or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.